Good evening. I'll call this meeting of the Cartersville City Council to order. If you will please stand for our invocation and our pledge.
Let's pray. Our dear gracious Heavenly Father, thank you for this evening. Thank you for this time that we can come and do the work of the city. We ask that everything that's done and said tonight would glorify you and go before us and give us wisdom as we make decisions. And it's in your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Alderman, the roll, please.
Gary Clark, Ward 1 here. Jason F., Ward 2.
Here.
Carrie Rock, Ward 3.
Here.
Calvin Cooley, Ward 4.
Here.
Gary Fox, Ward 5.
Here.
Catherine, Ward 6.
Here.
Hail, hail. The gang is all here. First order of business is the approval of our council meeting minutes from April the 5th. Council, you've had these well in advance and tonight had an opportunity to look them over. Chair will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve. I'll second the motion.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. We do have a correction to our April 7th of 2016 minutes. Mr. Lovell.
Yes, Mayor. When we approved those minutes back in 2016, we left out the approval of the zoning map from those, but we did review the videos of the meeting and it was actually done. So we are requesting y'all to amend those minutes accordingly.
I'd just like the record to reflect that Ms. Tate usually reviewed those for us, and so we'll blame her for that error.
Actually, I did look at those particular ones and Ms. Tate did make the motion to approve.
Well, she may not sit up here anymore, but we can still take shots at her, so we'll do that tonight with love attached to it. Chair will entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve the change.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Change is approved. Thank you. Mr. Porter, you've got the next item, please.
Yes, Mayor. This is a reapproval of Sam Grove and Jerry Milam to the Cartersville Building Authority Board. Their term currently expires May 15th of this year, and this new term, if approved, be May 15th, 2022.
Thank you. Chair will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Dan, you got the next one as well.
Yes, sir. This is the master bond ordinance for the water and sewer projects that were be on tap if approved. Basically, this bond is new legal language in our ordinance. It also is the next step in the phase of the new bond deal. As mentioned, if approved, it'll be about a $56.2 million bond. Closing is anticipated sometime later in May if the council does approve this. I recommend to be approval, subject to the engineer's report has to need some corrections on there and final approval by the city attorney.
Okay, is there any discussion on this item? If there's none, a motion's in order.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Mr. Lovell.
Mayor, this is to correct the ordinance involving the railroad and the fact that we had a section in there that was unconstitutional regarding the ability to fine the railroad for blocking crossings downtown. It's deleting that section, and I'm not recommending it for your approval, but we do need to approve it.
Everybody hold your nose. No, the truth of the matter is there was an ordinance on the books. We tried enforcing that, I guess it was about 5 or 6 months ago, and then the next morning learned that federal law prohibits us from doing anything when the trains are stopped across the tracks and creating a public safety and hazard and a traffic nuisance. So it doesn't make any sense to leave it in our ordinances. I guess we have to approve this, but it doesn't mean we approve what we actually have to put up with that. So that being said, any other discussion, or if not, a motion's in order?
Motion to approve.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. The motion carries. Mr. Menino, we've got a few zoning issues to handle tonight. Why don't you get us started with Z18-03?
Thank you, Mayor, Council. This is actually a second reading. This is a proposed rezoning of approximately 160 acres from R10 to RA12 and R20. Planning Commission did recommend approval of this with 8 enumerated conditions that were distributed at the last meeting. There have been no additions or changes since the last meeting.
And as we discussed in work session, I know that one of the issues, not really an issue or even a challenge, but one of the things that was getting ironed out in conditions 7 and 8 was access to what amounts to an abandoned county road, and that when it gets replatted,
Yes.
That will all get addressed, and that the current developer is going to be working with the other property owners to make sure that that's in place.
That is correct. Conditions 7 and 8 referred to that issue, and 7 is going to require a replatting, and condition number 8 is going to require a location for access down to Center Road.
Great, thank you.
That
Any
will
questions for Mr. Menino at this point? Thank you, sir. At this point, I'll open up a public hearing relative to file case Z18-03. Anybody wishing to step forward, speak for or against, may do so at this time. And seeing none, I will close that public hearing for Z18-03 and turn it over to council for further discussions, questions, or motions.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. The motion carries unanimously. Mr. Menino, I believe you've got our next item, which is T1801.
Yes, thank you again, Mayor and Council. This is a proposed text amendment, as you had noted, or I had noted previously. This is a second reading. This is proposing to add standards for electronic signs, additionally to allow fueling stations to have electronic signs for their pricing. This only specifically addresses one road. We'll be coming back further with additional changes that'll address citywide. With that, Planning Commission did recommend approval of the proposed changes to the sign ordinance.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Menino at this point relative to T18-01? Thank you, Randy. I'll open up a public hearing for T18-01. And once again, anybody wishes to step forward, speak for or against, may do so at this time. And seeing none, I will close the public hearing and turn it over to council for final consideration.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously. T18-02.
Thank you again, Mayor and Council. This is also a second reading. This is a proposed text amendment to correct our MU standards in our current zoning ordinance. In the MU, we are allowed, or townhomes are allowed, but there are no standards included. The standards are included under another section of the ordinance. This was copied, forwarded to this section, and with that, Planning Commission did recommend approval.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Mr. Menino on this item prior to the public hearing? Thank you, sir. I'll open up a public hearing for T18-02. Once again, anybody wishing to step forward, speak for or against, may do so at this time. And seeing none, I will close the public hearing and again, turn this over to council for final consideration.
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Keeping you busy tonight, Randy. T18-03, please. This is a first reading.
Yes, Mayor, as you had noted, this is the first reading along with the following case, SU 18-01. They are directly related to each other. The proposed text amendment is to the MU standards of our ordinance. Currently, the MU standards do not allow for outdoor storage. This proposed text amendment does allow for outdoor storage to the side and rear of properties for landscape operations with a special use permit. The following application on the agenda is the actual special use permit that would correspond if y'all choose to approve the proposed text amendment. This is directly dealing with Taylor Farm Supplies looking to relocate. One of the sites they had found is on Tennessee Street. They cannot do the storage that is necessary for their some of their landscape material, and with that, the applicant has proposed the subject text amendment. The applicant is present for this request.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Randy on this item? Thank you again, sir. And again, I'll open up a public hearing for T18-03. And anybody wishing to speak for or against may step forward at this time. And if you would, sir, your name and your address for our clerk, please.
Ron Goss, 120 West Cherokee Avenue. I'm really speaking more on the second one, but since they're tied together, I just want to let you know that we're here. I represent the Fellshaws, and if there's any questions on that, I'm available.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'll close the public hearing for T18-03. And since this is a first reading, we'll take this up for consideration at our next council meeting. And we'll move on to SU 18-01.
Thank you again, Mayor and Council. As I had noted, this particular special use permit application goes directly with the previous text amendment. And with that, if you choose to do the text amendment to allow for special use permit applications for the outside storage in the MU, this is the application for said requirements that Taylor Farm would have to go through to do so. With that, Ron is present to answer any questions. Taylor Farm is looking to relocate from their existing location in the downtown to another location. They found a site on Tennessee Street, and they've been through the plan review process, working with staff to locate at this particular location and doing some preliminary design work. If this goes through, they'll move forward with their design work and finish up with the plan review process with the city. With that, the applicant is present.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Menino on SU 18-01? Thank you, Randy. Open up.
Randy, you did say at this point you hadn't had anybody in the proximity complaining.
No, actually,
I
the
haven't had
adjoining
any
property
calls
owner to the south came in our office to take a look to see what they were doing. He seemed pleased that they were looking to do that at that particular location. And he actually showed up at the planning commission meeting just to observe the process, but he didn't speak in opposition to it. No.
Good.
Thank you. Any other questions for Randy? Thank you, sir. Open up a public hearing for SU 18-01. And again, anybody wishing to step forward, speak for or against, may do so at this time.
Again, I'll interject this. We did send out certified letters with details of this. I was able to contact, I think, 7 of the 9 adjacent property owners. I did not get any objection. Got typical questions that I think we were able to answer, but I do feel like that most people felt like it was good for that corridor and the redevelopment, so.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
So on the, I think that we're talking about side and rear outdoor storage. Is that correct? Would that be the rear of the building or the rear of the property? That's side?
Well, I will say this, one of the reasons that this was designed, this site has been played with a good bit. If you notice, there's no parking on the front. The goal was is to leave that green space, put the parking to the side. People will be entering the side of the building, even though there will be a front door. Really, the main entrance probably is going to be on the side. That way, that gets items out of from along Tennessee Street, gets everything to the side, gets everything to the rear of the building. The way the building is, the way the topo is, and the slope, and of course the long building to the north, it sort of shields everything back there. So I think there's some good buffers in place, and I think that probably, one other point when they make that transition, that business has evolved a good bit. A lot of what you see there is not going to Tennessee Street, and they're getting that building is about 2.5 times what they're at now, so everything can come inside, and it's designed so that, as you know, the crates with the lawnmowers, everything can stack in the building and not outside. So I think this is mainly for seasonal items, flats of flowers, things of that nature.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to comment on SU 18-01 may do so at this time. And seeing none, I will close the public hearing for that item. And again, this is first reading. We'll take this up for final consideration at our next council meeting. Mr. Menino, the next item.
This is my last item, I promise. We're requesting that council authorize the mayor to sign a GIC letter, Georgia Initiative Community Housing, for a proposed senior project on Tennessee Street, senior apartments. That particular zoning was approved last year, and last year we had several applicants for the GIC award, and with that, this project was not awarded. This year there was only one applicant, and it is the same one that the city signed the letter for last year. And with that, again, we're requesting council authorize the mayor to sign the letter for the applicant to submit to the Department of Community Affairs for this GIC award.
Okay. Any questions for Randy on this item? And I'll just add a note that project was, it's the same, as you mentioned, the same application as last year. It is multifamily housing, but it is senior multifamily housing.
That is correct.
I know that's an important distinction to some.
It will be restricted to senior living.
Thank you. Any questions for Randy? And is there any other further discussion? If there's none, a motion's in order.
Motion to approve.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Council, before we go further, hold on just a second there, Chief. I want to mention something as we were going through this. I know that, you know, one of the things as a city is we all strive to do, especially in times of growth, which we're getting back into, fortunately, is finding that balance between growth, quality growth, and working with people while keeping our standards in place. And I know it's been a topic of conversation amongst council while we were in our visiting session. It's something that I mean, admittedly, a lot of times when we hear from community on the outside, a lot of it has to do with planning and development things. It's the most challenging thing that we do. But if you take a look at what we've done here tonight, for the most part, I mean, you take a look at a rezoning request on Center Road where staff has been working to get conditions to make sure that this redevelopment can happen. You take a look at adjusting the text amendments that make things possible in relation to signs and cleaning up some other things. You also take a look at a business in Taylor Farm Supply that's needing some type of special help in order for them to move and grow their business. What we're doing up here tonight is what we should be doing, and I wanted to point out the fact that, again, it's easy sometimes for us to hear from people that say that we're inflexible or that we're not trying to work with people and do that. What we've done here tonight is a pretty good reflection of what we've all felt we wanted to do, and what we're continuing to do along with staff is using common sense and rules and in place and adjusting things when we have to make it possible for people to redevelop property or redevelop their property or grow their businesses. So I don't want to hurt my shoulder, you know, patting ourselves on the back or anything, but I did want to point out the fact that here's a pretty good example of times when we are using policies to make it a little bit easier and to work with people so that they can prosper and help our community grow in a good direction. So just wanted to make that comment. Chief McCann, you've got the next item.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. In order for us to run criminal histories, driver's histories, fingerprints, we have to enter into an agreement with GCIC. We do that every 2 years. We have an audit coming up May 4th. So I've got 3 agreements from the PD, the Drug Task Force, and the court. And I've also got an agreement from the Bartow County Sheriff where we exchange information. Additionally, any vendor that comes into the PD or around our GCIC stuff needs to sign one of those agreements. And I don't have them yet. We will have them before May 4th. So what I'm requesting is the council give you, Mayor, the authority to sign all of these agreements as they come in. I have 4 agreements here tonight. I anticipate additional ones. So I'm asking for approval for you to be able to sign them as they come in.
Okay.
Mayor, basically what the motion would be to authorize the mayor with the approval of the police chief to sign all the GCIC agreements to renew the criminal justice system information management control agreement that are submitted to the city prior to May 4th of this year.
That's what I was going to say.
That's what you just said. I just reworded it.
All right. If there's no discussion, council, try recreating that one.
I'll make a motion to approve the authorization for the mayor with the chief to sign the GCIS appointments all prior to May 4th and as they come through the city.
Well done. Absolutely. We got a motion and a second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Chief. Dan, you've got the next one.
Yes, Mayor, this is a Raymond James Bond Investment Advisor Agreement. Based on the approval of the new master bond for the water and sewer system, there's going to be some times we're going to invest some of those proceeds of the bond, waiting for projects to kick off. This is basically an investment advisor agreement, allows us to sit down with Raymond James and come up with a proposal, which will come back to City Council, does not authorize us or make us use Raymond James. We'll look at them, we'll look at some other opportunities for us, but it gives us an opportunity to sit down and talk to them and come up with a proposal to see if it meets our needs to invest those bond proceeds while we're waiting for projects to move forward, and I recommend it for your approval.
Thank you, Dan. Questions, comments, or motions?
Motion to approve. I'll second that motion.
All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Land bank contract.
Yes, sir. This is basically authorizing the city council to put $1,000 into the land bank contract or land bank agreement we have with the county. The county's put up the same amount. It allows us to kind of help that, steer that a little bit further to do other projects hopefully down the road.
Thank you, Dan. Questions, comments, or motions?
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Architect and engineer for Fire Station number 3.
Yes, sir. Fire Chief Scott Carter and Ray King, Deputy Chief Ray King, and myself have looked over proposals with a couple architectural engineering firms, and we're selecting Croft and Associates, who designs the Fire Station number 4, and it's going to be similar look for Fire Station number 3. It's going to go on Village Hill Drive. The proposal is $149,700. This is a 2014 SPOS funded project, and recommended for your approval.
Thank you. Any discussion on this item? And if there's none, a motion is in order.
Make a motion to approve.
I'm going to take Gary's motion to approve. He got in there quick. Would you care to second that?
I'll second that.
Thank you very much. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Dan, once again, you've got this MCCI a bit.
Yes, sir. This is, MCCI does the council agenda packet. We also have a repository where we'll scan a lot of our documents in there. This basically is the next step for us to start doing things electronically in-house, our purchase orders, permitting process that Randy sends to different utility departments to sign off. This allows us to do a lot more things electronically and try to reduce the paper flow. The cost of the training is $7,175. It's the next step. Again, we're looking to make things more of electronic workflow and get away with the paper process, and I'm recommending for your approval.
All right. Any discussion? If not, a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. All right, Bob, you've got the next 4, I believe.
Sir, good evening, everyone. First up is one we're all painfully familiar with. We have had a lower bearing failure, the number 1 and number 4 pumps and the screw pumps in the secondary. We discussed this graphic in the work session. I put this up here because I know everyone has probably asked themselves, I've certainly asked myself, when is this going to stop? But what you see up here is red dots are opportunities for it to continue. The green dots are things we've already addressed. They've been replaced or refurbished. The orange are things that are in need of some sort of repair now. But as you can see, we still have more red than green. So what we're asking for tonight is approval to replace or to rebuild the lower bearing for the number 1 and number 4 pumps in the secondary lift station. And those will, we're packaging that with installation assistance from the manufacturer that produces these things. The total that I'd like to ask for not to exceed is $23,500. 15,500 of that is actual bearings, it's parts, and the remainder is the installation assistance from the factory.
I should have asked you this in the work session. How long, I mean, obviously it's a critical part of the plant, but how long has this system been working 24/7?
There are various ages among all that up there. What you're talking about is pieces of it have been replaced. So the tube with the actual flights that lift the water, some of those were put in around 2000. But what we have not replaced are the drive components, the motor, the gearbox, and the bearings. On the secondary number 4, so the top of the screen, the 2 green dots there, when we took the top bearing out, it still had a casting date in the outside of the bearing housing. It was 1973. So, I mean, a lot of the drive components have been in these systems since the early and mid 70s in continuous use since then. Now, we cycle each of these. They're not all running all the time, but they have been in a duty cycle since that time, and they are just coming to the end of their life. I think something that came up in work session that's worth noting here too, the number 3 pump train in both the primary and secondary, those pumps will be replaced when we do the major plant project to upgrade the plant in this bond-funded project. So we hope to clear those dots off the board in the course of that work.
Great. Thank you. All right, so Chair will entertain a motion relative to the bearings for secondary number 1 and 4 screw pumps.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Next item, Bob.
Yes, sir. Next up, we'd like to seek approval for a project out in the Atco Mill Village. This is an area that we are plagued with lower fire flows. As you may recall, we've applied for a grant to do work out there on the water distribution system twice in 2015 and 16, I believe it was. This area, because this is a multi-million-dollar project to go through and completely replace all this, as you can imagine, we sat down and kind of came up with ideas of, okay, how do we make it better in the interim? And we ran several of those ideas through our hydraulic model to evaluate, see, okay, what do we get the most improvement out of? And this was the winning project. What we're talking about doing is tying an existing 6-inch main in Mayflower to a 10-inch main in Sugar Valley Road. So the work will actually take place at the top center of that yellow box. But the yellow box is here to show you that in doing this project, we boost fire flow to this entire area. And this is one of the worst areas in Atco because currently that whole box is fed through a small section of 4-inch line at the bottom middle. So it's just a restriction in our ability to get water into this area. So by feeding it from the top, we eliminate that restriction and put some redundancy in this area. We took bids for this work. The low bid was WT Construction at $28,206.01, and we do recommend that for your approval.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Bob on this item? If there are none, a motion's in order.
Make a motion to approve.
All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Next item, please, Bob.
Yes, sir. We have received a new NPDES permit. This is the permit that allows the wastewater plant to discharge treated water back into the Etowah River. As one of the many conditions that came with this permit, we are instructed to develop a watershed protection plan. That plan is required to be developed and implemented in the course of a year. We have 6-month reporting requirements for progress on that. We have asked Rent McDuff and Associates to develop this plan. They developed the impaired waters plan that is used by stormwater for part of their regulatory process. And we're hoping that in developing these plans jointly, that they can find common sample sites that will satisfy requirements of both plans and get us out of doing redundant sampling, make both plans easier to fulfill and to comply with, and hopefully save us some money in the process. Rent McDuff gave a price of $6,230 to develop that plan and get it approved, and recommend that for your approval.
Okay, thank you. Questions, comments, or motions?
Do they have a understanding that we want to try to marry these two together?
They, when I sent them a proposed scope of work, I don't recall if that was number 1 or number 2 in my list of things that I wanted out of I think compliance was number 1 and evaluation for overlap and eliminating redundancy was number 2, yes.
Okay.
Any other discussion? If not, a motion's in order.
I'll make a motion to approve.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Last item for you, Bob.
Yes, sir. Last up is our Don Drive aerial sewer elimination. In this particular project, we have been looking at all of our aerial crossings and evaluating them. Is something we do on a regular basis. When we looked at this one, it became evident there were a couple of problems out there. The pipe has negative slope. It's settled on the uphill side, if you will, which means that the water has to flow out of the high end of the pipe, and you can imagine it's not happy about that. Additionally, this pipe where it crosses the creek is actually taking on water from the creek where it crosses, causing our flows to increase dramatically in this area. When we have a large rain event, the creek level rises. So we took a look at, initially we went out there looking to rehab it, but what we came up with is the project you see here. Inside the yellow circle, what we plan to do is the direction of flow would be from the top left coming across. So we want to intercept that flow and dump it into an existing 48-inch sewer. And when we do that, we can now eliminate that creek crossing entirely, and thus eliminate the problem of the water getting into the sewer from the creek. We took I asked for a proposal from Rent McDuff again on this. They proposed a price of $19,215 to do the engineering. The reason we went with Rent McDuff is they are the design firm for our Mission Road sewer project. That project is basically ready to bid. And in talking to them, we decided that it would be advantageous to bundle this work with that work, because this is a fairly deep sewer. We'll have a contractor with all the equipment necessary to do this already here. And so we would ask that you approve this proposal from Rent McDuff, and that we would treat it essentially as a change order to the Mission Road sewer project, and bundle these projects together.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Bob on this? If not, a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries
Thank you.
unanimously. Thank you, Bob. Chief King, you got an item for us tonight.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We're coming tonight requesting permission to purchase the budgeted loose equipment for the new fire truck, which is hose, nozzles, axes, mounting brackets, and forcible entry tools. All the individual pieces can be seen on the tax quote. Bids were sought from 4 different vendors. The low bid was from Municipal Emergency Services at $18,803.49, and we recommend this quote. This is a budgeted item to be paid for with lease proceeds.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? Not a motion.
Motion to approve this item.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Chief. Mr. Hasselbrock.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. The Electric Department is requesting approval to purchase 2 interactive display boards. They're smart boards, and it's going to allow us to get rid of using paper copies of the maps, and it'll allow us to use real-time data, and it's going to modernize our operations somewhat. And we have the IT department helped us secure 3 bids for the interactive boards, and the cheapest and the best one is with the United AV Systems for $19,389.82, and we're asking that council approve the purchase of these boards. It is a budgeted item in our current fiscal year budget.
Okay. Any discussion? If not, a motion.
Motion to approve. Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes, sir, Mayor and Council. Parks and Recreation Department took quotes on a specific mower, a Grasshopper 300 series. We had 3 return quotes, recommending the best quote from Franklin Tractor in the amount of $8,898, which I did have a mistake in my department summary. I had $90. It should be $8,898. And this is a budget item, and we will be paid through lease pool. I recommend approval of this.
Okay, so you're asking to go with the best bid?
Best bid, yes.
Okay. Thank you. Any discussion, and if not, a motion?
Motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to go with the best bid.
All right?
Thank you.
So you've seconded that?
I'll second that.
All right. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. All right, Mr. Reinhardt.
All
Honorable Mayor and Council, tonight I'm asking for a safety wall to be built in the customer service area. Currently, customers are able to come back, if you make a long story short, this also has to do with an issue that came up last year with council wishing to make safety a little more, make things safety a little more precedence in the customer service area. Currently, the customer service area is open, and any of the customers can come back, but they can visit the customer service folks. The wall will be from floor to ceiling. It will have 4 windows, bulletproof windows with slide-through for documents to go underneath. The work will be done by, not customer service, it will be done by Public Works. I have already ordered the windows, and the funding for this is currently in the 2018 budget, and I'm asking for the work to be done by Public Works, and I'm also asking for it to be the wall built to not with a not-to-exceed price of $15,000.
All right. Any discussion?
Tom, does this address the cashier area above that as well?
It will not. If you remember, the cashier area was done several years ago. It has about 1.5 feet opening from the ceiling to the, well, from the glass wall where it is to the ceiling, but nothing else will be done to
Did we
that.
get a price on what that would cost?
We did not know.
I'd like to ask the mayor and council, if you recall what's down there, there's a gap that somebody technically could jump over. Maybe we can get Public Works to look at that, maybe a couple more $1,000, put something on a wall up top of that so people couldn't get over that, if that's okay.
Well, I'm guessing a lot of this work was done after an assessment by the police department, correct?
Yes.
So I guess I'd put you on the spot here, Chief.
I agree with Dan.
Okay. All right, so,
I'll have to go back.
why don't you just go do an assessment? You've got to come back before us for the extra funds to do that. I'm sure it won't be a problem.
Okay.
But thank you for putting that together for us. Any other questions for Mr. Reinhardt on this item? If not, Chair will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously. I got to interrupt you there for a second. Tom, we got one item to add. Chair will entertain a motion to add that item.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Item is added. Mr. Lovell.
Mayor, this is a right of entry agreement for in the Waterford with a Michael DeGraff. It's for 533 Waterford and a city's, I guess, drainage area there that we have. Apparently to develop his property, he needs to get about 515 cubic yards from us. So we are entering into an agreement to allow him to do that according to the plan submitted and to pay the city $2.50 a cubic yard.
Okay.
It is recommended by the city engineer for your approval.
Thank you.
I believe a representative of Mr. DeGraff, Mr. Lugens, is present if y'all have any questions of him.
Any questions for anybody on this?
This is just to raise the elevation where he's at.
Yes. And if there are no other questions, the motion's in order.
Mr. Approve.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. All right, Tom, finish us up.
Honorable Mayor and Council, we'll be looking tonight at the financial report for February 2018 and comparing it to February 2017. And in the general fund, revenues increased over last February by $123,000. Expenses increased by $902,000. A lot of that added expenditures is for the early payment of a fire truck. 3 areas of revenue that I look at on a monthly basis. Local option sales tax have an increase there of about $102,000. Police fines and forfeitures have an increase there of about $28,000. And building permits and inspection fees have a decrease there of about $51,000. In the water and sewer fund, revenues increased over last February by $473,000. Expenses increased by $1.1 million. This is due largely to increased personnel costs and increased capital expenditures. In the gas fund, revenues increased over last February by $1.6 million. We've had a good couple of last months, December, January, and February, having cold weather. Expenses increased by $1.1 million, and this is due to increased personnel expenses, increased operating expenses, increased cost of purchased gas, and increased capital expenses. And in the electric fund, revenues decreased by $1.7 million over last year. Expenses increased by $268,000. This is due mainly to increased personnel costs, increased operating expenses, and increased costs of purchase electricity. The stormwater fund revenues increased over last February by $30,000. Expenses decreased by $21,000. This is due to decreased personnel expenses and decreased capital expenses. Solid waste fund revenues increased over last February by $47,000, while expenses increased by $250,000. This is due to increased personnel expenses, increased operating expenses, increased capital expenses. We are expecting, however, a reimbursement from GMA lease pool to offset the cost of a piece of equipment that was purchased back in October. And then finally, in the fiber optics fund, revenues increased over last February by $70,000. Expenses increased by $337,000, and this is due to increased operating expenses and increased capital expenses.
Thank you. Do we know just generally about how much that lease pool reimbursement's gonna be from GMA?
I believe it's around $142,000.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other questions or comments about the finance report?
I had a couple of questions, not specifically about the report. When will y'all start your planning for the audit for this particular year end?
We will actually start sometime in the month of June.
Okay.
And just to let you know, I will be bringing, hopefully, we've got to do an RFP for another audit firm because the 4 years with our current audit folks has run out, so it's time to now basically bid that out.
Is there any way we could get that delivered or make it part of the RFP where it's delivered in either October or November at the latest? I thought February was a little late this year.
I have been struggling to get our audit firms to give it to us in a more timely basis, and at the end of last fiscal year, 2017 fiscal year audit, that was one of the big things that I hit our current folks up with, and they assured me that we would have it no later than the end of December, and it was February or thereabouts. We actually have until December the 31st to get it filed to the state and to everybody else. I would like to have it not the last day of the month, the December, being able to file it. I'd like to have it sometime early December or late November. So I will strive to do whatever I can.
All right, one last thing. I would like us to entertain, I don't know what format it would need to be in, that might have to be a work session, because it would take where we go into that audit with a little more detail than what we do in an open council meeting.
Mhm.
Maybe a work session where it's an hour or two, where we dig into that a little more. Is that something y'all would consider doing?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it'd be a public meeting, but
Yes,
yeah, I mean, we're
exactly.
not like we're trying to hide anything, but it's just, I think, I agree with you. It'd
I
have
would
to be
like
like
to
a
have more
special,
time, yeah.
a special called type of work session or meeting that we would go through this. Anybody that wanted to come see it, I think you and I talked about that
Yes.
earlier. I think it's a great idea, so.
You tell me what you want, and I'll make sure it gets put in the RFP.
I think it would be helpful to me.
Okay?
Mayor, on that point you make, the GFOA normally only gives a 6-month window for the last couple of years, and we must have been asking for extension, and they don't typically like that continually to give you that award. So
We have actually been on time. The GFOA is another one who, as long as we have it filed to them by December the 31st, we're okay. There was a couple of years back even further that we had to file back in January due to do some issues with our audit firm, and we were able to hopefully continue making that GFOA deadline also.
they actually had the CAFR done because you have to submit the CAFR by that deadline.
We have to have it ready to submit and submitted by December the 31st.
That's the point. That's normally the driver that you have, that auditor should have that done sometime late November, bring forth the council in December, and then we can submit the paperwork to GFOA to continue to receive.
Just to let you know, the state frowns on issuing or letting you get an extension, and the GFOA frowns on it also. Again, trying to strive very hard with whoever we bring in to have it done within that 6 month, preferably sometime October, November timeframe. And again, it depends on when we get things closed out and how quick they can get in, get their audit done and put things together. But I have talked to other audit firms that work with larger cities and municipalities than we are. They have no issue getting things done by late November, early December, and completed and issued and everything filed correctly. So I do have hopes.
Thank you. Anything else? Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Any other business that needs to come before council this evening? I will only mention that council will be at work on Monday and Tuesday with special called meetings. And so, everybody's got the material in front of them. Please, as we all know, come to class prepared on Monday and Tuesday. We got some important work to do. If there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Adjourn, stay go. Not get a harumph out of that guy.
Yeah, I mean.